to the first tutorial for Flappy Bird in Small Basic. This is great if you've had some idea of programming before and is really focusing on how to use coordinates and create graphics and animation, I guess. If you've never done any programming before, I'd strongly recommend you check out my other tutorials, which should start with the text constructs within programming. It talks more through the ideas of if statements and the ideas of loops and those kind of core elements like variables. If you don't have that knowledge, I think you may struggle with this video because I'm going to go through those concepts assuming that you understand them. However, if you've done some sort of programming, whether it's in Small Basic before or in another language, I think you'll be able to follow along with me and create your own Flappy Bird type game. It's not going to be exactly the same as Flappy Bird, so I'm going to try and just give you all the ideas that you can make your own version, whether you wanted it to be identical or whether you wanted it to be a bit different. And mine will certainly be a bit different, but it will give you all the ideas you need to be able to make the original. So to start off with, we're going to start by creating the graphics window for our game to appear in. To do that, I'm going to start by setting some variables of the graphics window, for the graphics window. So for example, I need to know the graphics window's width, how wide I want it to be in pixels. So I'm going to store that in a variable, and I'm going to start with a variable called GWW, graphics window width. And my graphics window width I'm going to set to 800. I'm also going to need to know the height, so I'm going to have another variable called graphics window height, and I'm going to set that to 400. I appreciate these aren't the best named variables, but for me, I think they're quite quick to use at the moment, and I think they're familiar enough for this small game that they'll do just fine. So we're going to move on from that and actually start to create the graphics window. So graphics window dot, and we're going to go and give it its width, so graphics window dot width, hit enter to autocomplete, and in the width we just say it's equal to, now again I could have typed 800, but because I'm going to need the number 800 later on to know what the width was, I'm going to, instead of typing 800, just give it my variable graphics window width. As well as creating the width, I'm going to create the height of the graphics window, so graphics window dot height, and we're going to set that to be the graphics window height variable that I set earlier on. If we go and run that, sure enough, we create that graphics window that we wanted, long and fairly short in height. The reason for that is I feel the game of things moving across the screen, it's nice to have a bit of a wider view, which isn't like the original game, but I think it makes the game a little bit better. So what would be a really nice thing to get done this tutorial is just to get to the point where we can get an object moving across the screen. To create an object, we're going to use, in Small Basic, what's called shapes. Now, we can just draw images to the screen, but we can't then move them. So the really useful thing about shapes is you can move them and replace them, and the old version of where the shape was doesn't stay on the graphics window, which is really important if you want something to move, unless you want it to be shadowed the whole time it's moving. So to do this, we're going to use a new command called shapes, and we're going to say shapes dot, and for our turret, let's just start with a rectangle, and we can change this later on. So we're actually just going to type shapes.add, and we want to add a rectangle. So I'll just hit the down arrow to go and find it. There it is, and hit enter. So shapes.add rectangle, and you'll notice on the right hand side now, Small Basic is telling me it needs a width and a height for that. So open brackets, the width of my rectangle, well, I could type these numbers in, but I'm actually going to say, well, it'd be actually nice to have them as variables as well. So I'm going to say that the, let's call it tube width is going to be, let's give it 50, and we're going to have tube height, and I'm going to have the tube height as, I don't know, let's say 400. So when I come to draw this, I just need to say that the width is tube W, and the height is tube H, which looks pretty good. You'll see more and more as time goes on the value of setting variables with constants at the start of the game, and then later on using them within functions. You'll see that more and more as we progress, and certainly if we decided, for example, we wanted the graphics window to be slightly bigger, then everything in our program would update just by changing this number, and that's the beauty of it. So shapes.add rectangles, tube W, tube H. Now the only problem is we need to store that shape and give it a name. So I'm just going to call that because there's two tubes that are in line with each other in this game, I'm going to call this one top tube. And this is a new variable name. So top tube equals shapes.addRectangle. And this variable is just storing this shape. Okay. Once we've done that, if we actually run the program now, if I'm not mistaken, it'll appear in the top left corner. Brilliant. And as our height of our shape is exactly the same as the graphics window height, you'll notice that it fits perfectly. Now, actually, we would like our shape to be moving across the screen. So let's see if we can come up with how to do that. Well, we're going to need to start off by saying we want it to start over the right hand side. And I think we'll get as far as that today, and then we'll plod on with that with the moving of it in the next tutorial. So I'm going to say now that the top tube we want to move. So I'm going to say to shapes because we want to do something with our shape. And I'd like to say .move because we'd like to move that shape. Where would we like to move the shape to? Well, we give it the shape name and the x and y coordinate we want it to move to. So I'm going to say shape name is top tube, which we named a minute ago, just up here. And the x and y coordinate we'd like it to move to, well, if we imagine that this was our graphics window, I'd like it to appear just off this grid. Now, because when we draw a shape, it always appears from the coordinate we give it, it'll always appear that as the top left corner of the shape. If I do make it appear in the top right corner of the graphics window, it will just be off the graphics window, only just. So let's try that, and hopefully we'll be able to see the shape, which is going to be a bit disappointing in some respects, but I think it'll be fine for now. So we're going to move the shape to, and the shape we're going to move is top tube, and the place we'd like to move it into is, well, the x coordinate is going to be the graphics window width, because it's how wide it is. See how useful that is already, we don't need to remember the number. And how high we want it to be, well, it's going to be at 0.0. Now I'm going to explain that and how these coordinates work in a little bit more detail now. So you'll notice we can't see that shape anymore. And the reason we can't is actually it's being drawn from this very top corner and across down this way. And in fact, if I drag this graphics window out, we can now see our shape. Now the reason it's drawn it there is in Small Basic and most other gaming environments and anything with a graphics user interface, you'll find that the coordinates start from 0, 0 in the top left corner, slightly different to what you're probably used to when you're drawing graphs and things in maths where you're often working from the bottom left corner. So when I talk about it being 400 wide before I extended it, this is up to my 800 wide. And the 400 down is coming 400 down. Note that's not minus 400 because in fact it actually works the other way around. So this is 0, 0. This coordinate down here would actually be 0 because we've come across 0 and we've gone down 400, so the y coordinate is 400. So it's not as straightforward as normal mathematics, it's just the coordinate has always been reversed. But anyway, we can see that it has drawn it where we expected it to, even though it won't appear to the user when it's first drawn. We're going to carry on with this next tutorial by seeing if we can gradually get it to drift across the screen.